Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast.
Are you ready?
Am I ready? The only thing I can say is we left 30 degrees and now I'm back in my basement. I'm wearing a sweater.
So I got my space heaters.
Your space heater is on. Like, if I'm honest, I missed the heat.
I did go for a ride this morning and almost froze my hands off.
Like, it was cold.
It was cold.
I ended up doing a walk. I didn't sleep well last night to actually go out for a ride. I went for a walk instead. Oh, man. Like,
yeah.
It's cold.
I know.
Hey.
We're not in Cannes anymore.
We're not in Cannes anymore. That's for sure. That's for sure.
But today we are going to cover some of our highlights from Cannes.
Yeah, no. Well, let's cover some of our highlights. I think things that stood out for us. I would argue things that likely weren't even talked about that I think are important to highlight.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great things, and I don't know if you don't mind me kicking off. I think one of my biggest highlights was just meeting the incredible professionals, thought leaders in person.
Yeah.
We've interviewed a whole bunch of people over the last 4 years for this podcast.
Yeah.
And to have a moment to spend time with them, and this goes out to Ty Heath. This is like Jan and Mimi.
Yeah.
The guys from Tracksuit, both Connor and Matthew, David Tiltman, James Herman,
Grace.
Yeah. Les Bennett, Karen Nelson Field. I mean, the list is endless. But honestly, did we mention Grace Kite as well? Grace Kite too.
Yeah.
Anyways, like, it was just one of those moments where you're just, I'm surrounded by a lot of intelligent people right now, and we're in their circles, in their circles, and I think that's important to highlight.
Yeah, totally. I remember you were saying this a couple of times throughout the conference, throughout Cannes, but I would love to get your take on this now.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that weren't really talked about, at least as far as our experience goes?
Yeah.
That really kind of surprised you?
Honestly, there's a couple ways to look at this. So yes, it is a creative festival, and it's going to be predominantly oriented around celebrating incredible creativity, effectiveness, and all that. But where I struggle a little bit, where I think we can't lose sight of some of this thing, and maybe it's by design, and this is where it's open to debate. But for me, one of the biggest ones was personalization. If you recall, like, the poster child of Martech for the last, God knows how many years has it always just been, invest in the right technology, make sure you're meeting the consumer where they are with the right content, and this promise of personalization. Maybe that dream, that one-to-one dream is quietly being retired, or is dying out, and maybe we're just at the end of it, just tired of pretending that it actually works. And there was no mention of that in any form. I even went back to look at all the speakers and all the topics just to double check. Hey, maybe I just missed it, right? But there's absolutely no talk on personalization, which you would assume would be a big part of creative effectiveness, right? And it just goes to show you that maybe we as an industry right now are moving in a different direction. So that's really the first one that stands out to me, and especially as a media practitioner myself. So I think the big takeaway there is Martech is still important, but focus on the stuff that it helps drive results versus just adding to your Martech and reducing your media facing dollars. Because at the end of the day, if you can't get the media out there and you have invested all this money in Martech, you're really not achieving anything.
Yeah, that's a good point. The personalization thing, where that came out for me was, I'd say with the talk that we heard with Grace and Tom Roach and Grace Kite.
Yeah.
The idea of building brands with lots of littles, meaning there's lots of formats, I think is somewhat obvious because lots of people are doing it already, but just the evidence that it can deliver on brand performance and business impact and all that kind of stuff was the part that was new. Yeah. The part that was the distinction for me was the relevance of an ad can be done on any kind of medium. Like, you can have a relevant ad on TV that it feels like it's one-on-one. And the same with the formatting, the right formatting of an ad. Like, you don't put a 30-second commercial on a TikTok ad. You know what I mean? Like, there's formatting and relevance that I think is more important than the idea of being able to create ads at a one-on-one scale.
Right.
And really the one-on-one scale is You and I have had this conversation a couple of times about anytime an executive has asked you to not include them in the targeting, so exclude them from the retargeting of any kind, it's hard.
Yeah.
Most
Yeah.
of the time, you can't do it. So, like, if we can't do that, what makes us think that we can actually do one-to-one on exactly the people we want?
I agree with that. Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
And I think it's proven. I think you made a comment in one of your posts that, I was re-listening to one of our Cans Cut, and you talked about, point me to the research that showcases that this is actually a thing.
Yeah.
Right.
I looked it up
outside
again.
of people looking at CTRs as a reason why personalization works. I'm sorry, that's not enough.
Yeah. Well, and then CTRs aren't linked to most other things either. So, like,
right.
Yeah. Or was another one that you had?
Maybe this one's going to make me feel like Marc Ritson a little bit, but social purpose.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of around, but it's like less brand bravado, more quiet purpose, perhaps. Feels like it's a shift more to authenticity. Maybe that's a good thing, but it's definitely not a main stage anymore. And I think for a lot of brands that did invest in social purpose, again, I think you and I've had this conversation that if you're doing it because you genuinely believe in it and it's woven into your ethos of your organization, and there's a few companies that do that really well, I think it's great. But for those other ones that were looking to check off a box in a marketing checklist, social purpose check, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think that's no longer a thing. Remind me, how did Marc Ritson put it in his talk? You're standing in front of the fridge, he said.
Oh yeah, like open the fridge, take a look of your inventory, so to speak, of what's in there, and like genuinely ask yourself, how many of these things did I buy because of the purpose of the organization aligned with my values?
Yeah,
and like probably not.
That's the reality of it, right?
Yeah.
And I know the argument used to be, when all things are equal, consumers will prefer a brand that has something X in social purpose. I don't know if that's still valid anymore, though. Because if it was, I think we'd still be hearing about it, especially in these larger forums, or how social purpose became front and center for creative effectiveness and things like that, which we walked the wall, we walked the basement, so to speak. I don't recall seeing anything on social purpose being celebrated from a creative effectiveness perspective.
Yeah, there's that one from AXA, which was that insurance provider in France, that it's not even purpose. To me, it's more promise to the customer. If their purpose, and I don't even know what their purpose is, to be honest with you, but purpose to me would be like, we believe in supporting victims of domestic violence. Let's say that's social purpose. Cool. That's really noble. But what they did is they actually put that into rider and said, like, for anybody who's going through acts of natural disaster, like for emergency relocation services, you're covered under acts of natural disaster or domestic violence. And so then all of a sudden it becomes less about like this glossy thing we're putting over top of our brand, and it actually becomes something that's component of their business model, which costs them more money, to be honest, like, to be frank about it, because you're now providing insurance at no additional cost for people who have these tragic things happening to them. It's the right thing to do. It's amazing they did it, but
sure,
it's delivering on that promise, and not just making the promise, that really matters. So purpose can be really good, but I just think it needs to be really, really baked in everything that you do. Yeah,
and baked into likely your positioning, right? I think we keep hearing, like, loud and clear, position becomes incredibly important in these exercises. So again, if you fundamentally believe that is your North Star for the org, then how is it baked into your positioning? Then how do you bring it to life and creatively, continuously, right?
Yeah.
Okay, the last one that I'll highlight quickly, and again, I think this one has a strong tie to something like a creative festival like this, but there was not a lot of conversation around brand safety and media transparency. Yes, Adam Morgan and Karen Nesselfield talked about the wastage in media. However, there was no talk about made for advertising websites, MFA sites. There was no conversation around supply chain waste. Did we solve it, or did we just stop talking about it? Because I think that's a big issue that we're facing in our industry. And I would have liked to have seen that a festival like this actually helped drive even more awareness around that.
Yeah, I get your point. I think there's probably a little bit that was, like with Karen Nelson Field's talk, a little bit of that relates to brand safety, but it's not exactly the thing you're talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah. I think in part also because of it being a creative festival, if there was such a thing as the media,
the media festival,
Cannes Lions Media Festival, or Festival of Media, like instead of it being creativity, maybe that's where you get that. But yeah, that's a fair point. Totally. I mean, ultimately, the media, the creative has to show up on some of this media. So
I still think there's a tie there.
Totally.
I agree with you. But I still think it would still be a good opportunity to highlight something like that.
Yeah.
So getting that out of the way, let's talk into the things that did stand out. So how about, you wrote a great couple posts on this. So you have free reign, my friend, right now. You did such a great job articulating it. So what are the things that stood out to you?
I mean, really, I think it was David Tillman that when we had a conversation with him or interview with him, he was talking about the length of a campaign. And then that really kind of stuck out for me, that campaigns used to be measured in years, not in weeks.
Yes.
And so we think, even me, when I think about short-term, long-term, somehow I think of a campaign still, even at like 8 weeks, being somewhat long-term, which is not at all long-term.
Not in that context. No, it's still short.
So, it's one of those things that I need to think a lot more about in terms of, I think if you build a creative platform, the creative platform, with all the evidence that was talked about, needs to live for multiple years. Like TD Bank's got their green chair thing that's been around for 20 plus years. Guinness has had their Christmas ad that's 20 plus years. We heard Kit Kat's positioning was, I think, 90 years. Take a break. That one, right? That was what they said.
Yeah.
So, like, think in terms of decades rather than weeks, or at least, very least, years instead of weeks. And so that's a really good one a big one for me as a takeaway. The other thing is trying to relate that to metrics. When we were chatting with Mimi and Jan, they had an epiphany. I had my own little spark moment where I was like, wait, because I think Jan had mentioned something about Warren Buffett. And then I remember that quote, I think it's attributed to Warren Buffett, about in the short term, the stock market is a voting machine. In the long term, it's a weighing machine. So the idea that stocks can go up and down in the short term, they can be manipulated, just like revenue can go up and down. It can be manipulated by things like discounting and all that kind of stuff. But over the long term, the intrinsic value of an organization is measured by a weighing machine. And so the idea between short and long, having stock, like similar to stock markets, having a voting machine and a weighing machine to measure outcomes, I think is really good, because over the long term, you want to see things like profitability go up, not just volume, sales volume, which you would see in the short term. But over time, you want to see the profit also increasing.
No, exactly. I wonder.
So that was a big one for me.
Yeah. And when we think about time, and maybe the reason why you still think about a campaign being 8 weeks still being long, if you think about the campaign cycles in their traditional formats that we would operate and put them out into market for, right? The reality is, though, if we go back to, ads don't wear out, they wear in, so to speak, how do we start reframing a lot of that and look at more build creative for the long haul versus like those 8 week sprints that we define in a campaign moment where we're doing like weekly reports against it. And campaign was, here's what it did here. Yeah. And I think this is, again, maybe just a reframing on how we define the term campaign, especially for the larger brand awareness campaigns that we have.
Totally. Yeah.
What
else?
Else?
Another one for me was share of voice is a really important thing. Excess share of voice, especially if you want to build revenue, profits, market share, all that kind of stuff. There's the excess share of voice model that's been really valuable for a lot of people for a long time.
Sure.
The thing about that is that marketing budgets are constantly being cut. And so it's just a reality. So how do you get excess share of voice without getting extra budget? Because it's not to say that you shouldn't ask for it and we shouldn't try and, we don't deserve it and all that kind of stuff. It's a reality like we all face every now and then. So just some of the creative ways, there's that Tecate ad about the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America thing that they did. And just it struck me with that there are ways to manipulate media coverage not manipulate, like hijack media coverage.
Hijack, yeah. That's a great way of putting it.
And leverage, shares from individuals to try and get additional share of voice that you wouldn't have otherwise gotten. Right. I don't mean going viral necessarily. I just mean that idea that if you can somehow amplify everything through earned media, shared media, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Then that's one of the ways of getting excess share of voice without actually having to pay for it.
Right.
It's a different tactic. There's a lot of things that go into it and all that kind of stuff. I don't know that's a sustainable practice for every campaign, but it was just one of those like aha moments for me. I was like, right, this is just a real thing when budgets get cut. But we all want extra share of voice. So how do we do it with the reality of budget cuts?
That's tough. That's tough because you have to be okay. Like you talked about the Tecate ad, and you need to make sure that there's buy-in internally to be able to go ahead and try to execute these. I don't want to call it a stunt, but these quick reactionary activations. And it's hard in a lot of these larger organizations to achieve that buy-in because of all the stakeholder management that you have to go through. What is everyone's level of comfort of, going and trying to be somewhat, in the moment, real time, if you will. And I think because, forgive me, because I don't remember the gentleman's name from Rethink.
Mike Dubrick, I think.
Right. He did a great job, great presentation.
Amazing
some of the great work that Rethink has done in showcasing that reactivity, if you will. The reality is, though, that's a small subset of advertisers that have that comfort level in doing that. And how do we instill more of that thinking, I think, is important to kind of go after that excess share of voice with limited dollars. I don't see any other way of us as practitioners gaining that just by sheer spend, because we don't have the spends.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of Mike and his talk at Rethink, so the one ad that I had some thoughts around was the You Up campaign with IKEA, which is super cute.
The booty call.
Yeah. So they did this thing where they're like, okay, well, there's a problem. People don't buy enough IKEA mattresses. IKEA isn't known for mattresses. So how do we increase awareness, drive sales? And so they so one of the ways they thought about it was, well, what if we sent a whole bunch of people a note like a booty call in the middle of the night when they're probably people who are not sleeping, they might answer.
Yeah, exactly.
So they did this You Up campaign. It had tremendous success and drove sales increases,
global success, by the way.
Yeah, like it was really well done. 17% increase in online visits, 36% increase in mattress sales. So, but to me, it was also one of those things where I'm like, right, I used to think about TV as being the lead ad. I know TV's not, a 30-second ad is not the right thing for the format. We talked about that. But whenever I thought about a big campaign, I used to think a lot about, well, it's not really a big campaign unless it has TV. But if you don't have the budget, what other ways can you do something like that and get the reach and get? And so this campaign was a really interesting one for me. I know they had done other media. I don't know if they ended up doing TV or not, but just the idea of a lead ad in a campaign it doesn't have to be TV.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That in this case, they're using direct messages, which doesn't seem scalable. And yet they send it to like 3.5 million people.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So there's just some really cool. I mean, I think that's where there's some really cool things with MarTech and stuff where you can do things that are seemingly unscalable on mediums now that you probably historically had never been able to do. So just rethinking the way to do campaigns that still get you the reach that you're looking for, but just doing it in a lot more cost efficient way.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Rethinks, they're incredible with that.
Yeah.
The other example that they had, if you remember, was the Wolverine and
the ketchup
and Deadpool, ketchup and mustard, and then the Cranch. They have the Cole Cranch was such an interesting take because it was product, it was marketing, it was product, it was labels, and they seized the moment. Again, they capitalized in a moment where Taylor Swift was seemingly using Cranch, and they ended up, because the product existed, it just wasn't selling. And then they called it seemingly Ranch, if I'm not mistaken, because that's how someone posted about it and saying like, anyways. So I thought that was another great example of how an insight in the moment, social listening, can become important to drive a consumer insight that then can lead to sales.
Totally. Yeah. And that one too, like, again, the medium, it's not all about the ad in that particular case. Well, and even for them with the Shohei Ohtani Coors Light campaign.
Exactly.
It was the product. Like the product became part of the campaign. And it's, like there's a lot there that you can do. If you think more broadly about the tools that we have, and they're not just about a TV ad. Like there's a whole bunch of creativity that can come from just thinking differently about the tool set.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So those are, like, for me, those are some of the big ahas, I would say.
I'll add one to that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a campaign. It wasn't an activation. It wasn't, it was a number. And you'll remember this because it was actually our first day. $198 billion per year is what it costs us for running dull ads and dull media. So buying dull media. And like Karen Nelsonfield and Adam Morgan, they laid it out with brutal clarity, right? That we're spending billions on ads that are either aren't seen or aren't worth seeing because they're both. It's both sides. The creative will influence the media will help influence the creative. And because attention is scarce, dull creative gets even less of it. So when that, for me, like as a media practitioner, really, really stood out to me as something that we have to do better. And if you remember, she started when Karen was on the stage, she said, maybe it's time to move from viewability to seenability, bitches. Yeah. And it was just like, it was so raw, but like, we talk about viewability metrics and things like that, but it was 2.5 seconds that I think that one of the reports suggests that you need to have in front of a consumer for the consumer to start building some mental structures against what they're seeing.
Yeah.
How much of our ads out in the wild doesn't even get 2.5 seconds of attention.
About 85%. This turns out.
It turns out it's 85. Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy though. Like,
that's what I mean. So that for me is the biggest takeaway. Again, this is like my own, what I'm going to take back to in my day-to-day, to my peers, to my agency, etc. But it's, we can sit here and over-optimize everything towards a click, towards a specific event, whatever, right? But if consumers aren't actually seeing the ads in the first place, we have a bigger issue.
Yeah, I mean, I know Dr. Fu, I think is Augustine
Fu Analytics.
Fu? Yeah.
Augustine Fu, yeah.
Yeah, it comes to mind. Like, I think he's been banging that drum for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
But it's really important. Like, I keep thinking about that analogy too. Like, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound?
Right.
Apparently not. Like, same thing for media. Like, if an ad is shown to people, but it actually isn't seen, does it leave any trace? Not really.
No, you know what? I love what you're saying there, because for me, it's not just about optimizing the buy. It's about earning the right to be seen. And that's where like the creative itself plays a big role, but also how you choose to bring it to life on the media side needs to be also on point.
Yeah.
Right? They do work together. I don't know, call this like multiplier effect 2.0, so to speak. Right? But anyway, that was my biggest aha moment. And then it actually happened on our first day. But there was, I have to say, incredible conversations, incredible panels, incredible thought leadership. I don't think I went to a talk that I left being like, oh, that was a waste.
Yeah, not at all. No. We didn't even talk about the CMO forums that we were attending.
No.
We didn't really even get, there's so much there. Like,
we didn't get outside.
It's impossible to cover all of it. Although I do think we have an idea next year where if we end up getting approved to go back, like, I think we have a bit better of an idea how to do the coverage.
Yeah.
But
we'll probably divide and conquer more.
Yeah. There's so much material all over the place, and content and great ideas and great talks. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. And it's I think we talked about this in one of our canned cut as well. It's like you have everything that happens within the Palais, but then you have everything that's happening outside of the Palais. Like we met with Kantar off-prem, right?
Yeah.
We had a great conversation there as well. We met with System 1 off off-prem as well, right? And it's these little things that
we saw them off-prem.
Pinterest, we went and saw them. Exactly. I went to the Amazon port and spent some time there.
Yeah. Just for a second, you went to the Amazon port.
Yeah, sorry.
They have their own port.
They had their own port. Yeah, it was pretty epic, actually.
Yeah, it's pretty well.
But it just goes to show you the amount of information that is there at your disposal. And the 5 days may seem that's a lot of time. It's not, especially with everything that's happening continuously. So anyways, we'll be even better for next year. And I know you said if we get approved, we're getting approved. We're going back. It's gonna be epic. Got to put it out there, manifest that.
Yeah. Anyway, that was awesome. I'm really glad we got a chance to do that, V. And then,
sorry. One last thing. Huge shout out to our brother from another mother in the podcast world, Connor Byrne.
Yeah,
That's what I call marketing. The guy's an absolute legend. He has meeting him in person. We've had him on the podcast. We've done some episodes together.
Yeah,
we already had a vibe that this guy's awesome. But meeting him in person,
he's the best.
I just got to say, he's great. He's absolutely
he's the
great.
best.
Yeah,
his
I appreciate
podcast
you.
Is great. He's great. Yeah, he's just he's such an awesome guy to meet in person. It was so fun. It was kind of like, it's weird. I used to have this when I was on like Twitter a lot, when you'd talk to people online a lot, and then you meet them in real life, and you're like, oh, that's cool. Like you already kind of know them.
You already know them, yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome meeting them, and it was great.
Yeah,
hopefully
he was
we
great.
To do that again.
Yeah. And with that,
yes,
we have come to our end of this episode of our coverage of Cannes. Now, there's a lot of material that's coming outside of this. We had a whole bunch of interviews that we'll be airing over the next few weeks. So still a lot to come, but this wraps up our coverage of Cannes 2025. It was a slice. Absolutely loved it. Thanks for keeping us in your ears, everybody. You guys have been incredible.